On June 23, 1976, at 3:12 in the afternoon, a man in a gray linen suit walks into the marble lobby of the Société Générale on Avenue Jean Médecin in Nice. He is 43 years old. He runs a small portrait studio 3 blocks away. The clerk recognizes him. He has been coming here for over a year. He rents a safety deposit box at the standard annual rate. He pays in cash. He carries one object into the vault, alone, behind a partition where no one is watching. An alarm clock. He sets it to ring at midnight. He locks the box. He walks back out through the marble lobby and into the heat of a Mediterranean summer. He goes home. He eats dinner with his wife. He waits. Because he needs to know one thing. When that clock starts screaming at midnight, 3 floors underground, behind a meter of steel and concrete, behind the largest private vault in southern France, will anyone, anywhere, hear it? Midnight comes. Nothing happens. No call, no siren, no police. This is the story of Albert Spaggiari, a small-town portrait photographer who spent more than a year planning the largest bank heist in the history of France. It is the story of an 8-meter tunnel dug by hand through the sewers of Nice, of an entire holiday weekend spent inside a vault that was supposed to be unreachable, and of a sentence painted on a wall that would haunt the country for half a century. But it is also a story about who Albert Spaggiari actually was. Because the man who became famous as the gentle thief who stole without violence had a past most of France never asked about. A past in jungles, in prisons, and inside a clandestine far-right organization that once tried to assassinate the President of the Republic. We are going to follow him from the rice paddies of Indochina to the rooftops of Buenos Aires. From a chicken farm in the hills above Nice to the office of a French judge on the morning of March 10, 1977. From the photographs he took of the mayor of Nice to the night his own wife drove his body across an international border. And we are going to ask a question France has been quietly avoiding for 50 years. With neither weapons, nor hatred, nor violence. Was that ever really true? Albert Spaggiari was born on December 14, 1932, in the southern French Alps. His father died when he was a child. At 19, in 1951, he enlisted as a paratrooper in the 3rd Colonial Parachute Battalion. He shipped out to French Indochina. He was wounded twice. He was decorated for bravery. He came back from the jungle with a medal, a head full of things he never talked about, and a quiet contempt for institutions. In 1954, the year France collapsed at Dien Bien Phu, Spaggiari was court-martialed. The charges are sealed. The sentence is not. 4 years in military prison, dishonorable discharge. He came out different, smarter, patient, and looking for something to fight for. He found it in Algeria. By the early 1960s, Spaggiari was working with the Organisation Armée Secrète, the OAS, a clandestine far-right paramilitary group dedicated to preventing the independence of French Algeria. The OAS murdered judges. It bombed cafes. It tried 3 separate times to assassinate President Charles de Gaulle. He served more years in prison. By the time he came out, the world he had fought to preserve was gone. Algeria was independent. De Gaulle was still in power. Albert Spaggiari, age 38, did something that surprised everyone who knew him. He bought a small parcel of land in the hills above Nice. He raised chickens, He opened a portrait studio on Rue de France. He photographed weddings and first communions and the soft, smiling families of the French Riviera. And he began, very quietly, to plan the largest bank robbery in the history of France. To understand why the Société Générale was considered impossible to rob, you need to understand what was inside it. Beneath the bank's marble lobby, behind a single steel door, lay the largest private vault in southern France. 3 chambers, 4,000 safety deposit boxes stacked floor to ceiling. A time-locked door that closed every Friday evening and could not be opened by anyone, including the bank's own director, until Tuesday morning. Inside those 4,000 boxes lived the private wealth of the Côte d'Azur. Industrialists from Marseille, hotel owners from Cannes, aristocrats with villas above Monaco, cash never declared. Gold smuggled out of Algeria during the colonial collapse, the same Albert Spaggiari had once fought to keep French. Diamonds in folded squares of velvet, photographs that, if they ever surfaced, would end careers and marriages across the south of France. Even the mayor of Nice, Jacques Médecin, the man whose own father had given his name to the avenue the bank sat on, was rumored to keep a box inside that vault. And here is the part of the story nobody outside Nice remembers. Albert Spaggiari knew Jacques Médecin personally. He had photographed him at official events for years. He was, in 1976, the mayor's preferred portrait photographer. He had been inside that bank dozens of times, paying small fees, asking harmless questions, watching. By the spring of 1976, Spaggiari knew the bank better than most of the people who worked there, and he had begun to suspect the engineers had made one small mistake. The bank's engineers had designed everything around a single idea. You cannot rob what you cannot reach. The walls were the defense. The time lock was the defense. The 4-day holiday shutdown was not a vulnerability. It was the entire point. By the time anyone noticed something was wrong on a Tuesday morning, any thief would already be on a different continent, assuming they ever made it through that wall. And nobody in the entire history of French banking ever had. Because the engineers were so confident in their walls, they had made one small decision that would prove to be the most expensive mistake in the bank's history. They had not installed a sound alarm inside the vault. Why would they? The vault was buried under steel and concrete. Nobody was getting into that vault. But Spaggiari had not been looking at the vault. He had been looking at the dirt underneath it. For weeks before he ever tested that alarm clock, Spaggiari had been walking the streets of Nice with copies of the city's 19th century sewer maps tucked under his arm. Nice, like most old Mediterranean cities, sits on a labyrinth. Beneath the boulevards runs an entire second city of stone tunnels. Some date back to Napoleon. Some are wide enough for a man to stand. Some are barely wide enough to crawl through on your stomach. For 63 nights, Spaggiari went down there alone with a flashlight and a compass. He emerged before dawn, smelling of waste and damp stone, and went home to wash and sleep before opening his studio at 9. What he found was this: a municipal storm drain, 8 meters from the floor of the Société Générale vault. 8 meters of dirt, then concrete, then steel, then more concrete, on a straight line. Now he needed a team. Not friends, not amateurs. Men who could keep their mouths shut and their hands steady underground for 60 straight nights. He traveled to Marseille. He met with men he had known from the Algerian War and from the criminal underworld of the south of France. By late spring of 1976, he had assembled around 22. Welders, locksmiths, former soldiers, smugglers from the Italian border. One of them was named Jacques Cassandri, a Marseille mafioso who would, decades later, claim that he, not Spaggiari, was the man who actually planned everything. The French press would give the group a nickname that stuck: La Bandize Agoutie, the Sewer Gang. In May 1976, the digging began. Every night after the last cafe in Nice closed, the team disappeared into the storm drains. They strung electrical cable through the tunnels for lighting. They ferried tools on rubber rafts across the wider sections. They carried out rubble in their pockets, a few handfuls at a time, so the sanitation crews would not notice the dirt piling up downstream. The air was thin. The smell was unbearable. Some of them stood waist-deep in human waste for 6 hours at a stretch. One man passed out from the fumes and had to be dragged to the surface. Another cut his hand open on rusted iron, refused to come up for 2 more hours, and finished his shift, bleeding through a rag tied around his wrist. The soft-smiling photographer who had spent the previous month photographing the mayor of Nice was now, on those nights, crawling on his stomach through the city's sewers in the dark. By the second week of July, the tunnel was finished. 8 meters of hand-cut earth leading up to a thin shell of concrete that, on the other side, was the floor of the most secure private vault in France. Now Spaggiari needed one more thing: time. He picked the date carefully: July 14th, 1976. Bastille Day. The bank closed from Friday evening to Tuesday morning. 96 hours of complete privacy inside the vault. Just past midnight on Friday, July 16th, 20 men climbed down into the storm drain beneath Avenue Jean Médecin with acetylene torches, drills, electric saws, hydraulic jacks, 30 tanks of compressed gas, and crates of food and water for 4 days. They crawled the last 8 meters and reached the underside of the vault floor. It takes them most of the night to break through. They cut. They listen. They cut again. Every few minutes, a man at the entrance of the storm drain freezes, a footstep above, a car braking too hard, a stray shout from a late drinker outside a bar, and the entire team goes silent until the sound passes. Sometime in the early hours of Saturday morning, the last layer of reinforced concrete gives way, and Albert Spaggiari becomes the first uninvited human being in history to stand inside the largest private vault in southern France. He looks up. The air is cold. Cold the way only buried air is cold. The flashlight in his hand catches the edges of 4,000 steel doors stacked on every wall around him, and the light moves across them like water over a wall of mirrors. He can hear his own breathing. He can hear the soft mechanical clicking of the time lock that has just sealed him inside the largest concentration of undeclared wealth on the French Riviera. He has been a paratrooper. He has been a chicken farmer. He has been a photographer of weddings. He has been, for a brief and ugly stretch of his life, a man who believed he was fighting for the soul of France. And now he is inside a room the bank's engineers spent a decade designing to make sure he could never reach. He turns. He walks to the great steel vault door, the one designed to be unopenable from the outside, and he welds it shut from the inside. Now nobody can get in, and nobody can get out until they finish. For the next 3 days, this room is theirs. They set up a folding picnic table in the middle of the vault. They unpack foie gras, baguettes, soft cheese, and bottles of red wine. They drag air mattresses through the tunnel and stack them along one wall, and in shifts, around the clock, they begin to open boxes. Each box takes around 6 minutes on a custom-built hydraulic press. 6 minutes, then the next. Cash in francs, dollars, and Deutsche Marks. Gold ingots stamped with the seals of long-dead European foundries. Stock certificates. Diamonds in squares of black velvet. Bundles of letters tied with ribbon. They take everything liquid. They leave the documents and the love letters scattered across the floor. By Sunday afternoon, they have opened 371 boxes. Then something starts to go wrong. Outside, above ground, a summer storm rolls in over the Côte d'Azur. Inside the sewers below, water is rising fast. If the storm drain floods, the team's only escape route, 8 meters of hand-cut tunnel, disappears under several feet of water. And the men inside the vault disappear with it. They start packing up early. Before they leave, Spaggiari does the final thing he has been planning for over a year. He hands each man on the team a different paint marker, a different color, a different style. One letter at a time, each letter painted by a different hand so that no single handwriting can ever be matched to the message. They paint a single sentence across the wall. Sans armes, ni haine, ni violence. With neither weapons, nor hatred, nor violence. In the early hours of Tuesday, July 20th, 1976, the team disappears back into the sewers, dragging duffel bags of cash and gold behind them. They split up at the surface and walk toward 20 different addresses across southern France. At 9 that morning, the manager of Société Générale arrives at work. He places his hand on the great steel vault door. The time lock has released. The door should swing open. It does not move. He calls his assistant. They try together. Nothing. He calls the police. It takes them 6 hours to cut their way through the welded vault door from the outside. When they finally step inside, what they find becomes one of the most photographed crime scenes in modern French history. The picnic table, still set, empty wine bottles, foie gras tins, air mattresses against the wall, 371 open boxes, diamonds and bonds and old love letters scattered across the floor, and the sentence painted on the wall. There is no sign of how anyone got in, not until a junior officer notices a small dark hole in the corner of the floor. By that evening, the entire south of France is talking about a robbery nobody can quite believe. The newspapers give it a name, Le Casse du siècle, the heist of the century. The investigation is enormous. Hundreds of officers, Interpol, banknotes flagged at every customs post in Western Europe. For 3 months, nothing. Then, in late October 1976, the ex-girlfriend of one of the team members walks into a police station in Marseille and gives up a name. Within a week, that name leads to 2 more. Within 2 weeks, the name of the man who organized everything reaches the police. At that exact moment, Albert Spaggiari is not in France. He is in the Far East on an official photography assignment, accompanying his most important client, the mayor of Nice, Jacques Médecin. When Albert Spaggiari steps off his return flight at Nice airport in early November, 2 plainclothes officers are waiting for him at the gate. He smiles for the cameras. He smiles for the magistrates. He admits, calmly, to organizing the heist of the century. And then he refuses to give up a single one of his men, not under questioning, not under threats, not under offers of a reduced sentence. He gives the police a long list of false names, false addresses, and stories that go nowhere. He smiles when they catch him in a contradiction. He is held in a Nice prison through the winter. By now, he has been planning his second escape for months. At 10:15 in the morning on March 10th, 1977, Albert Spaggiari is brought from his cell to the office of investigating Judge Richard Boisiz on the second floor of the Nice courthouse for one more round of questioning. The window is open. It is a warm spring day on the Riviera. A small group of police officers stands by the door. Spaggiari sits across from the judge. He answers questions the way he has for 4 straight months. Calmly, slowly, politely. He misremembers names. He apologizes. He smiles. At one point, he reaches into his jacket and hands the judge a document. A sketch of the tunnel, he says, in his own handwriting. He has encoded part of it with great regret, and the judge will need a moment to work out which numbers refer to which sections. Boisiz takes the paper. He looks down. He begins to read. Spaggiari stands up. He walks toward the window. He says he needs some air. And then Albert Spaggiari jumps. He drops 2 stories onto the roof of a Peugeot 304 parked in the courtyard, rolls off into the street, and climbs onto the back of a motorcycle that has been idling at the curb for over an hour. The motorcycle is gone before anyone in the courthouse has reached the window. He will never set foot in France again. A few weeks later, the owner of the dented Peugeot opens his mailbox and finds an anonymous envelope. Inside is a check for 5,000 francs for the damage to his roof. No return address, no signature, no note. Albert Spaggiari spends the rest of his life on the run. He moves between Buenos Aires, Madrid, and safe houses across Italy and South America. He travels on false passports under at least 7 different names. A French court tries him in absentia and sentences him to life imprisonment. The sentence is never served. In 1978, from a hideout somewhere in Latin America, he publishes a memoir titled Les Égouts du Paradis, The Sewers of Paradise. The book becomes a bestseller. 2 films are made about him within a decade, and in the quiet years of his exile, France slowly forgets one specific thing about Spaggiari. It forgets who he used to be. The man France romanticizes, the gentle thief, the photographer, the author of the sentence on the vault wall, had once belonged to an organization that planted bombs in cafes and tried, 3 times, to murder a sitting French president. The hands that painted with neither weapons, nor hatred, nor violence had spent the early 1960s working alongside men who killed judges and shopkeepers in Algeria. France romanticizes the image, but the past was violent. Société Générale never recovers most of it. Of the estimated 46 million francs lifted from that vault, close to 30 million euros today, or roughly 32 million US dollars, only a handful of gold bars is ever traced. The rest disappears into the criminal economy of Southern Europe. Most of the money is gone. And then, 42 years after the heist, a man named Jacques Cassandre, one of the original 22 members of the sewer gang, publishes a book of his own. He claims, under a pseudonym, that he, and not Spaggiari, was the real architect of the entire operation. In February 2018, Cassandre stands trial in Marseille, not for the heist, which has long since expired under the statute of limitations, but for money laundering, which does not. He is acquitted of organized crime. He is convicted of fraud. He serves 30 months. The book is banned. And the question of who actually designed the largest bank robbery in French history quietly dies inside a Marseille courtroom. On the evening of June 8, 1989, in a small country house outside the Italian town of Belluno, Albert Spaggiari lies down on a bed and dies of lung cancer. He is 57 years old. His wife, Emilia, is sitting beside him. She waits a few hours. Then she carries his body out to a car. She drives him through the night, across the Italian border, through the mountains of Provence, and down toward the small town of Yair, on the French coast, where his mother still lives. Sometime before dawn on June 10th, she leaves his body in the courtyard outside his mother's house. She drives away before anyone sees her. In Italy, transporting a corpse across international borders without authorization is a crime. In France, it is a crime. Emilia Spaggiari has done, in her last act for her husband, exactly what her husband had spent his entire life doing. She has broken the law quietly, without weapons, without hatred, and, technically, without violence. Spaggiari never returned a single franc to the families he stole from. He never gave up a single one of his men. He never spent a day in a French prison after the morning he stepped through the window of Judge Boisis's office. His mother found his body at sunrise. He never faced a French cell again. The sentence on the wall is still quoted today: sans armes, ni haine, ni violence. The bank painted over it. The press recopied it. 2 films took it as their title. The country adopted it as a kind of national folk poetry. But here is what the country never quite asked out loud. When a man who once helped plan the murder of a sitting president, who once worked for an organization that bombed cafes full of civilians, paints a sentence on the wall of a bank he has just emptied of 30 million euros, is that a confession? Or is it the most successful piece of public relations in the history of modern crime? For half a century, France has chosen the romantic answer. Albert Spaggiari, who built his life around being underestimated, would have liked that. Tell us in the comments which Spaggiari you believe. The thief who refused to use a weapon, or the soldier who learned long before Nice that the most dangerous violence is the kind nobody sees coming.